Absolutely nothing else going on in the world as we speak on Friar Podcast, brought to you by NBC7, joining you live on YouTube Thursday afternoon. Appreciate you hanging out with us there or enjoying the pod later on in your podcast app. Thanks for being with us, as always, on Friar Podcast. Derek Togerson, a bit tied up at the moment. He might hop on at some point, but we are very excited to be joined by AJ Cassavell, who does a fantastic job covering the Padres for MLB.com and just celebrated an anniversary and a major life event. Got a lot going on in the life of AJ Cassavell. So excited to discuss that, as well as all the topics going on in the world of the Padres, whether it be Jeremiah Estrada or Matt Waldren, Darvish's hamstring, Fernando Tatis Jr. maybe heating up, and Mike Shildt getting a bit testy with us media folks. So we'll discuss it all. Again, thanks for being with us, and thanks to OG as a sponsor of the On Fire Podcast. Great place to watch whatever your sport of choice. If it's Padres games, an awesome place to do it. Maybe golf on the weekends, NBA playoffs, got the finals coming up. Whatever your sport of choice, tons of TVs at OG's. Great menu options. They're constantly updating their menu, and a wonderful beer list as well, which I really appreciate whenever I get to OG's. So thanks to OG's for all they do for the On Friar Podcast. Without further ado, the walk-up music. Pleased, as always, to be with you. It is the On Fire Podcast, brought to you by NBC7, joining you on an off day. Hope to maybe be joined by Derek Togerson at some point, but thrilled to be in the company of AJ Cassavell. Again, does fantastic work covering the Padres year-round, and I always end up kind of scrubbing the Twitter feeds of our guests just to make sure I'm not missing anything, and getting caught up on your content, which you obviously provide and do a great job with. But then I saw your anniversary, 13 years now with MLB.com. Do I have that right?
Yeah, that's right. It hasn't been 13 straight years. I was an intern for the first of those years, so I'm not quite at my actual 12-year anniversary with the company. But it's pretty freaking cool because when I started out, this is what I wanted to be doing for 13 years, and now I'm here. So cheers to another 13, hopefully.
Yeah, that's right. Your career as a teenager now. And on that note, it'll be not too long before you have a teenager of your own. But I was going to say, this is an off day technically, but as a new father, there are no such thing as off days. So I really appreciate you squeezing us in, because I know quite well from my experience the last 19 months what this life can be like.
Yeah, there's no off days, but I do have like an off hour or two because my wife took Carlo on a walk with one of our friends, and I'm just kind of here. And so this is how better to spend my the 2 hours I have on my off day.
I know.
No, it kind of just lined up. There was a chance Carlo was going to be here anyway, and maybe would have made an appearance on the pod. So
I was going to say, you should be like taking a nap or watching a show or just doing anything, just zoning out on the couch. I found that I
nap in today.
That's good. That's good. I found that I've done more like driving with nothing on in the car, or just like having the TV on mute, than I ever had before, just because I'm like, it's nice and quiet. And that doesn't always happen.
So far, he doesn't cry too much, and there's not too much going on. He's still young for that, but I mean, it's awesome. It's the best.
Yeah, it's an amazing experience, and congrats to you, congrats to your wife, because it's just an amazing thing to experience, and so happy for you guys. Glad that things are going well. Much to discuss, AJ. Trying to figure out where to start. I think Shildt kind of is the big talker. Just he's had another day at the end of another series where he's not super enthused with the line of questioning. Maybe the more pressing actual baseball thing is Darvish and the hamstring, and maybe another kind of pause in his season for a guy that's had some of these. Let's start there before we dive into Shildt and some other things. What was kind of your takeaway, your understanding of the severity of that? And after he came back and was so sensational for such a long time, now back-to-back kind of clunky starts, one that was abbreviated. How should we feel? What do we know about where Darvish is and how this projects going forward?
I think it was hard to probably get a grasp on the severity of it, just because it had happened A, so recently, but B, I think he was dealing with it a little bit going into the start, and so Darvish has pitched for 10 years in the big leagues, another 6 in Japan, so he can usually kind of know when you're going through something, when you can pitch that day and when you can't, and so I don't fault him for going out there and pitching through a little hamstring tightness, because there's no one who knows his body better than Darvish does. Darvish is very in tune with a lot that goes on, and so I would think that is a positive, given that he was able to kind of work through it, and then he seemed to he even finished the third inning when they had Stephen Kolek warming up in the bullpen. So I would think all this is a positive, just given that it's not exactly the Padres didn't view it as something so severe that he needed to skip a start, and Darvish didn't view it that way. But the fact that he went and got tests after the game tells me that, I mean, if you didn't get those tests beforehand, well, now there's something new that we need to learn and find out. So I guess the long answer, that's the long answer. The short answer is just we'll find out more tomorrow. And this is a guy who's 37 years old, and when you get into your mid to late 30s, as I know, it's a little harder on the body, and so we'll see what comes of it.
Yeah, I guess kind of. I guess that's the fear is, even if they are kind of isolated, one's a neck, one's a hamstring, that sort of thing. It's not like it's an elbow. He had the hip,
Which
I
is
think it
obviously
was
big.
a couple years ago. Yeah, it's not these super major, like setting off alarm type deals, but is this something that we should just kind of make peace with, that there are going to be kind of some fits and starts with the pitcher that's got his workload, that's got, the tread on the tires, so to speak. Obviously, like you said, he knows his body really well, takes great care of himself. He's going to check all those boxes, but maybe it shouldn't be a surprise when these types of things pop up the way they have with you, Darvish.
I think that's a good way of looking at it, just because it's such a long season, and honestly, maybe if he's a little younger, you just kind of pitch through this, and you hope kind of it heals on its own. But I just don't know with the neck and with the hamstring what the use is of running him back out there. I mean, who knows? Maybe he's completely fine and makes that next start. But I don't know what the use is of running him out there, of trying to run him out there for 33 starts in a season, when you could get a very effective Yu Darvish for 26 of those 26 starts there. That's pretty useful. And if he pitches the way he did over the last month, that's kind of exactly what you want.
We've got a congratulations, AJ, in the chat, by the way, from OZ. A shout out to you. So, yeah, from
Thanks,
all
OZ.
of us, congratulations. Yeah, and the thing is, like, Randy Vasquez has stepped in and done decent work. There are some options there that have had to be called upon in some of these situations. So to your point, might make sense to, as they did earlier with the neck, be a little bit cautious and not just kind of throw him back out there. Make sure that he's right before they, send him out there again.
Yeah, no, I guess that's my first answer is kind of my long way of saying it's not. We'll learn more on Friday about the severity of it, and obviously the severity could be more than kind of what I've expected it to be thus far. But based on what we heard going into it, and based on who Yu Darvish is, and kind of understanding where we are in the course of the season, if it's a short IL stint, it's a hamstring. It's not an elbow. It's not a shoulder. It's not worth kind of the level of concern that I think, or panic that I think a lot of Padre fans have every time they hear a stint on the IL.
A panic amongst Padre fans, which is fair, and I think is understandable. And I think also a fair segue to kind of the Mike Shildt conversation, because, even I was talking about it on the TV side and with our anchors, and Catherine Garcia mentioned, like, it's understandable with Padres fans and us that have been around it for a while, because there's reason to have some skepticism and concern because of how some seasons have gone. In hearing what Mike Shildt has said, and we talked about it a couple weeks ago after the Rockies series when he got upset, it seemed like maybe he doesn't completely grasp that, the idea that we've been through enough that we can't so easily just kind of scrape things under the rug and be like, it's fine, because it hasn't necessarily been fine. And maybe we're projecting that a little bit. But I think that's just kind of part of where Padres fans are right now with this club, and something that, maybe is worth a little bit more understanding from his standpoint, just given the experiences that everybody's had around this club in recent years. Is that fair? Does that make sense?
I think that's a fair way of looking at it from both his side and from the fan side. I guess like kind of having been in that press conference yesterday and having kind of been the latest to have his line of questioning called into question by Mike Shildt. Like it's what I'll say is I appreciate the heck out of his positivity. Like I like positive people. I think sports probably needs more of them. Some of these questions, I don't think it's necessarily like a matter of like being positive versus being negative, because I don't think a few of the questions have particularly been negative. I didn't think my question yesterday came from a negative place. And so maybe it's just kind of reading a little bit of negativity where there isn't, where it isn't there. But that being said, it still runs in line with his extremely positive and upbeat persona, which I think has look, like if he's not the greatest in press conference settings, which I don't think that he is, like that's not the biggest flaw for a manager to have. He's done a great job managing this bullpen. The guys in that clubhouse play hard for him, and they're situationally a lot better this year than I think they were last year. And so he's done a lot of really good things. If he's not the greatest in a press conference setting at the end of losses, that's very low on the list of what you need to be good at to be a good manager. And so, I mean, I think there's probably maybe some misunderstanding of where these questions are coming from his part. But I mean, he's within his right to be extremely positive, maybe overly positive. He's the manager of the baseball team, and he can do it as he sees fit.
Friday was a great example after they just get housed by the Yankees. And he takes a beat after all the questions are done. Usually, when you're in these settings, last question is asked, he answers it. There's no more questions, and people are out the door within seconds. I mean, there was no delay or hesitation. He kind of sits there, is kind of like tapping his fingers, like Stephen Kolek, really good, And it's like nobody's thinking about Stephen Kolek at that point. Shout out to Stephen Kolek, an inning in the third, scoreless, against that lineup. That's great. But that's just not how us in the media or why we're not necessarily thinking about that in a situation like that. And it seems like Shildt wishes everybody would like go digging for the silver linings in those types of situations. And that's just not how it works. And that's not necessarily our responsibility. I think to your point, one thing I've learned in my own career of asking questions to people and covering people like Mike Leach, who, if a question wasn't posed a certain way, like you could draw the ire of Mike Leach, like many other coaches. And when I was listening back to what happened yesterday, it felt very much like he heard you say your question wasn't about them being in a rough patch. You just happened to use the word rough patch. And that's like all he heard.
Yeah,
and
to speak about other times during the season, like a 5-game losing streak, getting swept by the Rockies, by the Phillies. Like they have had rough patches this season, but he maybe misinterpreted kind of where that was coming from. And you know what? He wanted to be positive about it. And I think that is playing well. That positivity is playing well in a lot of areas that maybe just aren't him speaking to the fan base and to the media. Like if it plays well among your guys and the way you go about your business day to day, isn't that more important anyway?
Yeah, for sure. And I think, how that plays in the clubhouse is far more important than how it plays with us and even the fan base, because obviously if they're all tight and they're all cohesive in the clubhouse and playing well and good things are happening, then everybody's going to be on board at the end of the day. It's just been, a little bit different. And, clearly there's this desire to kind of control the narrative a bit. And I even think I don't even necessarily take issue with a lot of what he said. I think what's surprising for me is kind of the tone and the defensiveness where, going back to the Colorado series, if you want to paint this as they've been playing really well, according to the reports and all this, all the info that he has, that's great. And even in this case, 7-9 series, yada, yada, these are all fine points. You can probably make these points without, being quite as on the defensive as he has been, but to each
I would agree
own.
With that. But yeah, he's the manager of the baseball team. He can do it how he wants.
I will say, he's right about 7-9 series, but if you go
they have
back,
played better baseball, and that was honestly kind of the point of my questioning was that they had played better baseball lately, and really just haven't quite hit that stride to take off to where, given some of the baseball that I've seen them play. And look, I took I took a bunch of paternity leave at the early part of the season, and they didn't play particularly well during a lot of it. So the team that I've seen, I came back right for that 5-game losing streak. But after that, the team that I've seen has been pretty good, pretty fundamentally sound. They've done a lot of things really well, and so just kind of maybe waiting for them to hit that next gear. But that's kind of where I was going with the line of questioning, and I think they were very close. And then yesterday's performance obviously didn't lend itself to going in that direction.
And I kind of think that Manny Machado nailed it on the head in the clubhouse afterwards.
Sure, yeah.
Our Todd Strain asked, like, hey, Shildt said this. Do you agree that it hasn't necessarily been a roller coaster? And Manny gave, hey, every season's a roller coaster, highs and lows. But towards the end, he said, it's been a roller coaster, but it's been a smoother ride. Highs haven't been as high. Lows haven't been as low. We've kept it relatively smooth. I don't know if he said more so than last year, but you got the sense that was kind of what he was referring to. And I think he kind of nailed it there. Like it's inevitable that it's going to be sort of a roller coaster, and there's that element to it. But I think to your point, it has been smoother. They have played better offensively, obviously better, situationally better. His bullpen, like you mentioned, I think that road trip, Braves and Reds, they were like 1 earned over 24 innings or something crazy like that. Super, super good. So there's a lot to be said there. But we're just kind of waiting for them to like really hit their stride. And then they've had these dips. They've had 2 kind of embarrassing losses to the Yankees yesterday, the Rockies series. And so I think it's fair to acknowledge that there's been a little bit of both. It's been better, but it also could be better, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes plenty of sense. And I think Manny nailed it there, because last season it did feel like and maybe it went with the way the expectations were coming into the season. It felt like when they won a game, it wasn't necessarily, it was like, oh, they should be doing this. And when they lost a game, it felt like the world was crumbling. Like Shildt said earlier this season, the sky's not falling in the clubhouse. Well, there were times last season where they'd lose a couple games in a row and we're still very much in the playoff picture. And you walk in that clubhouse and they're not achieving what they felt they should be achieving. And it did feel that way. It felt heavier than it should be for a baseball team. Baseball's a long season. It shouldn't feel like you lose one game and things are dire. And so maybe there's an element to that with what Shilt's trying to impart, whether it's through the media or whether it's to his clubhouse, that when things go wrong, hey, Stephen Kolek pitched a good game. If that's his messaging, like it's an 8-1, 8-0 loss to the Yankees on Friday night, like there are positives to be gleaned, and it doesn't have to feel like the sky is falling, because teams that make the playoffs lose bad games all the time. I think that's a completely fair point. And like you said, I think Manny may have nailed that a little bit yesterday. I also kind of appreciated what he said just on like kind of summing up, if they're playing like this over the long haul, he feels like they will be doing good things. Now, granted, Manny Machado, Fernando Tatis Jr., Xander Bogaerts when he's back, those guys need to get going. But there does seem to be maybe not a bigger picture view this year, but just an understanding of the smaller picture, that when things go wrong, it doesn't have to feel so crushing, because, I mean, that can demoralize you. That can lead to another loss. You can't let one loss spiral into 3. And there have been times this season where the Padres get smoked by the Yankees in a couple games in a row and then come back out and win a really kind of hard-fought 3rd game. I don't know that last year's team would have done that.
Yeah, that's a great point. What I find funny is, like, do we think Stephen Kolek's watching the post-game press conference? Like, these guys
he did pitch well that night. I had a little note I scribbled I have a whole notebook that I scribble like all like the things that I might ask questions about. And I did put his name there, but like then I looked at it like, well, I'm not going to ask that question tonight. Like maybe that's after he pitches has a couple more solid outings. And like Mike Shilt's mind is not wired the way ours is. He wants to seize onto every positive, which is well within his right and probably not a bad thing for this team.
Yeah. Our guy Rafa says they're 15-11 on the month, which is good, but when they lose, it's bad. 9-1, 8-0, 5 shutouts. As a fan, that frustration definitely builds when you know you're not winning the division. I think they're 6.5 games back, which certainly not out of the realm of possibility, but given how things have gone, you don't necessarily expect that. You kind of think they're playing for a wild card spot, which, given the way things have gone for wild card teams in the postseason, not the worst thing in the world. I guess, they've won 7 of 9 series, but if you go back 32 games, they're 16-16. So,
sure.
there's kind of that
the roller
balance.
coaster. The real roller coaster that counts is the one that has them 30-29 on May 30th. And that's, I guess maybe that's like that's the opposite side of kind of what we've been talking about with Mike Shilt's answers, is that like if he wants to take issue with the roller coaster, if he wants to ride the roller coaster where you win 7 of 9 series, well, that's not the roller coaster that you've signed up for. You've signed up for a 162 game season, and at this point in the roller coaster, they're one game over 500. So we'll see where it goes. I think there's a very good chance they're the fourth best team in the National League if they play well. Like and if you're the fourth best team in the National League in the regular season, you can do a lot of good things in October, and so there's clear building blocks there.
Yeah, just get in, and they're in position to do that. And but I think it probably they're gonna have to tighten some things up in some areas. And I think
Sure.
Obviously having star players contribute more than they have would be important. Again, a winning month, if you stack 15, 16 win months, you're going to do really good things. You're going to be in the postseason. If you were to give us optimism that, okay, the Padres are really going to do it in the month of June, they're going to hit their stride, they're going to sweep a series for the first time, they're going to have a win streak longer than 4 games, and they're not going to revert back to April when I think they won 10, 12 games, something like that. It's kind of they've reversed, I think, their record from April to May. Where should we draw some optimism? If we're going to take a page out of Mike Shildt's book and focus on the positive, what's going to continue to build in this team's favor in June?
Well, I'm very much not going to take a page out of Mike Shilt's book, because he would not say this, but I think the schedule lines up a lot more favorably in June. And so if the Padres can kind of play, I guess, like I was talking about some of the good baseball that they played in May, even if they didn't completely take off, if they play that brand of baseball in June, they should win a lot more games than they did in May because of the opposition that they have. And off the top of my head, I can't name it, but they have series against the Angels, the A's, the Mets, teams that they should be beating. And I think a few more. And I don't know that they have any of the true heavyweights coming through. I do think they have a series in Philadelphia, but aside from that, like they have series that they should be winning coming up. And they've got series where you would expect some of their stars to play like stars given the pitching that they're going to be facing. And so maybe if you get like right now, I wrote about this yesterday. I think the existential question with this team and kind of the way the pendulum can swing is, do the stars start playing like stars first, or do the role players stop playing like stars? And the answer is probably it's going to be both, because there's going to be regression probably in both directions. But if you can get these role players continuing to play well, maybe not at a star level, and you can get your stars playing like stars, that's a recipe to be playing into October. And I think there's a chance, given some of the teams they'll be facing, some of the maybe poor pitching they'll be facing, I think there's a chance they could take that and use it to springboard in that direction of getting their stars going, getting guys like Manny Machado, Fernando Tatis Jr., Ha-seong Kim, all of whom have been better lately. Like now you want to build on it against teams that you should be beating.
I laughed when you talked about the schedule setting up favorably, because they've got 6 games on the road coming up. They've got another 6-game road trip, Mets and Phillies, and then they end the month and kind of straddle the start of July, 6-game road trip in Boston and Texas. So maybe just the fact that they're leaving Petco Park will be good for them.
Yeah, I mean 3-3 at home, and they played better at this homestand than I think the last one. But maybe there's something to that. I still don't know what to make of it.
And it's hard to know what to make of, like, hey, favorable schedule, because that hasn't necessarily lined up with this team, like, with the Rockies and that sort of thing. So another reason that it just kind of makes it a little bit hard to project with this team, like you have an idea of like, oh yes, they should be able to go on a run. But sometimes if they're playing the Cubs and Dodgers and Braves, on the road, maybe that's actually a more favorable schedule in kind of a weird way with this team, just kind of way that they've operated. Fernando Tatis Jr. Still, and you wrote about him, was it Saturday after he hits the homer? Doesn't do his usual stutter step. You put together a great piece about that, talked about Tatis, and sounded like he was pretty open about kind of this phase he's in right now where he is not quite himself and didn't do the stutter step, doesn't feel the swagger, that sort of thing. If you look at the Marlins series, I tweeted out his batted balls from the Savant page, scorched a lot of baseballs.
Yeah. Did a lot of good things.
Didn't have a ton to show for it. The Red series, I think back-to-back days had big time hits. I think one was essentially kind of the go-ahead game winner, and you could tell he's pretty fired up about it. What are you seeing from him, and a guy that's had some good months of June? Now there was a stretch early in the season where he's hitting the ball hard, and it didn't turn into like a Fernando Tatis Jr. stretch. So these things don't necessarily. It's not as simple as saying, "Oh, he's hitting the ball hard. He's going to start hitting a bunch of homers." But is there, from talking to him, from watching him, is there reason to hope that maybe he can find that gear sooner rather than later?
Yeah, I think there is, just based on what we've seen, like what you pointed out, the fact that he seems to have kind of made some adjustments. I mean, he's been making adjustments. He says more than he ever has mechanically. I think he was swinging at a lot more of the right pitches in that Marlins series, and he said he wanted to make sure he had the right approach, and he swung at the right pitches, and he hit a lot of them hard. He hit a lot of them right at people. He obviously, if he does that sustained over a longer period of time, I think there's a lot in there. We all know how talented he is. I think there's also plenty to take from the fact that he hasn't fallen. Like his defense is still Fernando Tatis Jr. level defense, and so I guess I don't know what his highest gear is anymore, because we haven't seen it since the 2021 season. I don't know what's in there, but I think there's a significantly higher gear than the one we're seeing right now, and I think it's evident when you see him. I don't know what the number was, so I don't want to like just drop it, but it was something like he had 10 balls put in play in that Miami series, and either 8 or 9 of them were 95 miles an hour over or harder, and a number of them were barreled. And like, hitting is hard. Sometimes you do that and you hit into outs. If he does that over a sustained period of time, and he is capable of doing that because of the tools that he has, because of the swing that he has, because of the power that he has, that'll work out. And I think we've seen a lot of good things going forward with that. And then every now and then you see a game like that one where he hit the home run. His first 3 at bats were poor. He was swinging at pitches he probably shouldn't have been swinging at. He looked a little bit out of sync, and then he hit the home run, and he was very self-critical. And so there's also an element here of, like, I'm not totally sure what to read into Fernando Tatis Jr. being as self-critical as he was, because he said he wasn't swaggy right now, which he wasn't playing maybe at that level, so I understand it. But like, isn't the swagger kind of part of what makes him as good as he is? And don't you want him to be like, do you want
Like
him stutter stepping around third, chicken or egg? Like, is being down 4-0, like Fernando Tatis Jr. still stutter stepping, even if it's not as exaggerated? That's something that he would have done in the past. So I guess I don't know. I think there's a lot of good things with Fernando Tatis Jr. and where he's going, and some of the contact that he's making. And I think the Marlins series is something worth building on. There's clearly a higher gear in there at the plate. I don't know what the highest gear is anymore, is what I would say.
Yeah, I do think that and it's a difficult needle to thread, but I think there's a way of kind of having that exuberance without looking dumb when you're in a slump. And, I maybe it is a more understated stutter step around third base, and you can look really dumb, pounding your chest and doing all this when you're like one for your last 15. And that's certainly not been the case with him. But I do think that, like, can you just manufacture that a little bit? And would it help you and the team if you were just like, pounding the rail and hyping guys up and hyping yourself up and that sort of thing? And it's, partly for you, but partially for them. I just think, like, he's so important to this team and is still very much kind of the heart and soul of this team, that I feel like even if he has to kind of fake some of that exuberance and excitement and joy, like, I still think that's good for something, and you can do it without looking like a clown.
Yeah, and I think he is trying to figure out how to thread that needle, because I don't think he wants to be exaggeratedly stutter stepping around third base when he's in an 8 for 47 slump and he just hit a home run to cut the deficit to 4-1. Like, I appreciate that aspect of it too. And so if he can maybe manufacture some of that swagger in the right moments, maybe it leads to him breaking out and kind of finding the rest of that swagger that I think he's searching for.
Yeah, so 12 batted balls in the Marlins series, 9 were at 95 and above, and only 2 were under like 93 miles per hour, and they were like 83 and 89. So he didn't hit like one soft, didn't have one, I mean, it was all pretty much
that's
all
a positive
hard,
thing.
Very positive thing. And another thing that I found interesting from that piece was him talking about, and you kind of touched on it, but like him being more discerning at the plate and how he's typically been aggressive, and it's not necessarily been his MO. But there's part of me that's like seen him continue, and not this series, like you said, but throughout the season, continue to kind of swing at that slider low and away that has been sort of his bugaboo. And seeing that this season, I'm like, Now his K rate is lower. You know what I mean? So, um, but it's just like, gosh, shouldn't we have figured this out by now? And it's easy for me to say that, but maybe this is a sign that that's starting to kind of click with him a little bit.
Yeah, and you wonder, like, does he need to? Does he? I don't know. He's so when he's on, he's so kind of thoughtless in the way he plays. He just goes out and plays baseball like it feels like a kid playing baseball and playing wiffle ball in the backyard. Like, and when he gives comments like those, he's clearly introspective and trying to figure something out. He's also clearly thinking a lot. He's trying to figure out which pitches are the ones he should be swinging at, how does he get the most out of this skill set that he has and swing at the right pitches. He was saying he should be pickier, but maybe not more patient, just pickier about which strikes he swings at, lower than it was. But if he's not doing as much damage, like how do you get there? And so, I mean, these are all things that I think we spend a lot of time dissecting and analyzing. And I think clearly he does a little bit too, but when he's at his best, he's not dissecting every little bit of minutia, but he needs to get there. And I think when you see him get there, maybe he'll revert to that version of a guy who isn't thinking about what the right approach should be just because it's an innate feel. He just knows what it should be.
And I think one of his quotes suggested that it's not a mechanical thing. It is what you just described. And that seems encouraging to me, you know, rather than somebody that's trying to find the right mechanics and find their swing. It's just kind of honing in on what pitches he needs to hit and where he should be doing damage and where he should be laying off. Like, I don't know, for me, a less educated baseball mind than yourself, I would think that that's more encouraging than somebody that just can't find the right motion, mechanics, technique, that sort of thing.
Yeah, and I think he has been searching for that too. But if the approach is the question, well, sometimes that all that takes is maybe a couple. I mean, it's easier said than done. But for a guy that has done it before at a really high MVP caliber level, maybe what it takes is just putting a charge into a couple baseballs, and then all of a sudden it clicks, and you kind of feel it again.
I never thought I'd say this, but is Jeremiah Estrada the most fun player in the Padres clubhouse right now?
Yes. I mean, the wild thing is he just struck out 13 guys in a row, which is a record as far as data says it's a record. Like, we don't have data for play-by-play before the 61 season. So at least the expansion era, it's a record. And it's almost like that is a pretty incredible record. Like, to me, there's a lot of baseball records that just get thrown out, like, that are very cherry picked, like within this time frame, within this span, this stat. Like, Aaron Judge recently, I think, had the most doubles and home runs in a 20-game span of all time, or something like that's a cherry pick stat. Like, they're picking it, or maybe it was even like a 22-game span. Aaron Judge has been freakishly good for those 22 games. We have cherry picked that stat. 13 strikeouts in a row is not a cherry pick stat. That's just complete dominance for a short period of time that, like, we haven't seen. And everyone is just kind of like, yeah, well, isn't that cool? Like, Jeremiah Estrada's like, oh, I'm just trying to do my job. And then we ask him about, like, his journey to here. He's like, oh, I was just trying to make the team. It's like, dude, you made the team, and you're like the most dominant reliever in baseball right now. Yeah, he's fun. He's got a great personality. It's an incredible story. I mean, he went through a lot of injuries, getting waived by the Cubs in November. He walked. I mean, there's a lot to, like, how did the Cubs let this guy go? And I think even like the Marlins were asking that question in their clubhouse the other night. Like, where did he come from? Oh, he got DFA'd? Like, by who? And that's all fair, but he walked 38 guys in 39 innings last season. That's not sustainable for a 24-year-old pitcher. And credit to the Padres and credit to Estrada for being able to find what worked for him and put it into play. I know I'm going on and on about Jeremiah Estrada, but like you said, he's like maybe the most interesting guy in that clubhouse right now. He underwent a complete mechanical overhaul, so his motion is just a little bit more succinct and controlled. So he overhauled his mechanics. He completely changed his second best pitch, which is that chitter that he throws. It used to be like just a changeup, and he completely overhauled his third best pitch, which is his slider. So he overhauled his mechanics. He overhauled his second best pitch, overhauled his third best pitch, and is throwing his best pitch for a strike. Like, that's. If you said, all right, that's all he has to do to become the best reliever in baseball, I think most teams would be like, well, like, that's a lot of things he has to do. And credit to him, he's done all of that.
I mean, we are so quick to say Ruben Niebla masterclass. How much of it is that? How much of it is, you know, and the Padres didn't take very long before they scooped him up after he got DFA'd. how much of it is just kind of work that he put in on his own to try and figure out the chitter or figure out,
Yeah,
these other pitches.
I think it's like it's not a percentage one way or the other. It can be like 100% in both directions because it's absolutely a Ruben Niebla masterclass because this is a guy who was on the scrap heap last November. And I think a lot of other teams may have been interested in him, but the Padres got him. And Niebla saw those things. He saw what needed to be done with his off-speed pitches and with his mechanics and how to get that out of him. But like it takes Estrada being willing to do all the work, and I think he's regularly doing early work in terms of like keeping his motion as succinct as it is. And I haven't watched a ton of him, and this is something I need to go back and do. I haven't watched a ton of him with the Cubs to see the differences in what he's doing, but I've had it described to me by both him and Niebla to say that it's just more compact and he's not kind of coming open as much with his torso. That, like, it's easy to say that that's what needs to get done, but you have to do a lot of work weight room wise. You have to do a lot of work in terms of just like getting on a mound and working with different, like, plyometrically doing different things. And he's done all of that. And so it's absolutely a great job by Niebla to make it work. But I think the real credit goes to Estrada, who, like, we're kind of just getting to know him and his personality because he wasn't really on the radar in spring training. I talked to him a couple times, but not too in depth. Who seems very amenable to being coached, to being told, here's what you need to do to take you to this level. And he has taken those things and done them.
Yeah, I mean, it's just fun and refreshing when somebody does cool stuff like this and is totally geeking out about it themselves as much as we are. Like going in and out, talking about it like you just beat a level in a video game. The Talladega Night, I don't know what to do with my hands. Like it's just so many great quotes, and you can tell it's a kid that's just like, he is completely, like, he's living out his dream. He's having an absolute blast, and he's not hiding that. And I think that's, especially in a sport where, like, baseball. I remember even in spring training, I think Blake Snell's first spring training, he had like a scoreless streak. And I think you asked him about it, and he was like, well, I don't really want to talk about that.
He wasn't happy about that.
It was spring training, and so you see a lot more of that than a guy who is just so enthusiastic and just soaking up every aspect of it. And certainly, what was it, Tuesday night, continue to do that. I would have ordered a 13x13 at In-N-Out. That's just me.
That would have been fitting, wouldn't it? What is a 13x13? I saw you tweet that. What is a 13x13?
I think 13 patties, 13 cheese.
On one
burger.
I would not have ordered that. Oh, man. His order was perfectly fine.
Yeah, his order was perfectly fine. I would have ordered it. I probably wouldn't have eaten it, but I would have just done it as a flex. It seems stupid to ask how long can this go and how many people will we strike out, but I'm going to ask you that question anyways. Like, he's been the numbers for what he's doing is just ridiculous. It's like, and when he's seeing all these new teams conceivably for the first time, certainly the first time is this iteration of Jeremiah Estrada, you can kind of lend yourself to think, 13 might not be it. He might pad this number a little bit.
Yeah, he's gonna keep striking guys out. I think there will be an adjustment period from the rest of the league. Like, he is that stuff is so good, but the league just adjusts to everyone, and so he's not going to be striking out a million guys in a row all the time. Good hitters will adjust, and he will have to kind of keep being one step ahead of them in his pitch sequencing, and like, the fastball is so hard to hit that I don't know. He's always going to have that in his back pocket. Like, good luck, hit this fastball. Most guys can't, but there are enough guys in the big leagues that can. And so he needs to kind of make sure that slider's still where it needs to be. Make sure the chitter is where it needs to be. And, like, make sure they both can be thrown for strikes when he wants to, so that he can keep those hitters off balance. Like, his ceiling is not like, this is, I think, an anomaly, but he can still be just an outright dominant reliever, setting up Robert Suarez and help this team immensely going forward, as long as he keeps throwing strikes. Like, guys will adjust, and he will get, like, then he's not going to just strike out everyone he faces and no one can touch him. Guys will put the ball in play, but his stuff is good enough where, as long as he's in the strike zone, this is a dominant back end reliever, like one of the best in baseball, just based on how good the stuff is.
There's been two great quotes now said about their back-end relievers' fastballs, and it was Waldren about Suarez saying, F you, hit this.
Yeah.
And then Jeremiah, what did he say about his fastball the other night? Like, here it is. See what you can do with it. You
Yeah.
know?
Which is like a good mindset to have about your fastball. And like, if you like, one of the things I admired about Nabil Krismat was that was kind of his mindset too, but he didn't have that fastball.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you can't do that if you're, I mean, Nabil Krismat was fantastic probably because of that mindset, but like, these guys have elite fastballs. There's no reason to nibble around the edges of the zone.
Yeah.
They can throw it in the strike zone, and if you can hit it, there you go.
And
Good job.
I feel like a week and a half ago, we were asking, well, how are they going to get to Robert Suarez night in, night out? And all of a sudden, you've got Suarez, who's just been incredible, and then now, like, as fearsome, if this continues in some capacity, as fearsome in 8-9 as there is out there.
Yeah, it seems like it too. And one of the things, I kind of tried to sneak this into a couple of Estrada stories I've written recently, but like, when they traded Steven Wilson in that package to get Dylan Cease, I was a little more skeptical than I think the Padres were, and I was kind of like, why? Like, you could have just tossed in another prospect. Why Steven Wilson? He was a setup guy that was pretty useful. And I had a couple people tell me, well, I think we can make Estrada into that kind of guy. So like, this isn't, they saw this formulating, and it's playing out in a pretty impressive way. Like, that 8-9 is excellent right now. And what it also does is, like, you look at the rest of the bullpen and the guys kind of slot in maybe where they should slot in. And it's a really good bullpen right now, as the results have shown.
Yeah, I mean, tip of the cap to AJ Preller for that pickup, for putting their faith in Suarez, giving him the contract. I think they probably had to let Josh Hader walk either way just because of the price tag, even if, you know, some of kind of the usage stuff is aside. I don't think that was ever going to happen, and now they've got themselves in a great situation. Want to ask you about Matt Waldren, another fun pitcher. Maybe doesn't have the boisterous personality, although he just, like I said, gave you a great Robert Suarez quote. But one of the, if not the most fun pitches out there, the knuckleball. And I think there was some skepticism early in the season. Is he sustainable as a 5? Is it going to end up being like essentially a platoon where guys are kind of in and out of that spot? And then all of a sudden, last handful, 4 starts, he's been more or less lights out, 5 innings or so. And then all of a sudden he gives you 7 scoreless the other day, ups the knuckleball usage, got a little more heat behind it, low 80s than
a
high
normal
70s.
guy.
So it's looked a little bit different usage wise, some of the velocity and that sort of thing. But like, he looks like a real guy, especially for a 5th starter. I think there's so much like consternation about this guy. I'm like, he is a 5th starter, so there's going to be some element of like, it's going to be a grab bag at times. But man, he's been really, really good.
Yeah, maybe that consternation comes from like the depth, and Randy Vasquez has been fine, but like the depth, if some of those guys have been hurt, like, where do you want this guy pitching big games down the stretch? And the answer right now looks like the answer is yes. Like, he's that knuckleball is legitimately awesome. And I think it took him a while because it does different things in different places. Like, probably every pitch, breaking pitches are like that. Like, they do different things in Colorado and whatever. But I think a knuckleball, maybe more so than any other pitch, will do different things based on where it is in relation to sea level and the ballpark it's in, day or night. What he's done a great job of is kind of understanding how his knuckleball is playing that day in that game. And then based on that, how he should mix those other 2 pitches he has to keep the hitters off balance, not always expecting that knuckleball. So the knuckleball is still is tough to hit when he throws it. And like, that's the fun part to watch, because every knuckleballer I've ever watched in my entire life has just been like, go R.A. Dickey, Tim Wakefield, all those guys just like go up there, throw a bunch of knuckleballs, which, like, to be clear, is fun, but not as fun, I think, as like if you're throwing like 60% knuckleballs and then using that as your primary pitch, and then like, oh, here's a sinker that is really nothing special of a sinker, but because you throw the knuckleball that you throw and the hitters are not ready for it in any way, shape, or form, now it's an elite sinker because the guy's so off balance. Like, that's cool. It's cool to watch him understand what he should be throwing when, and how the knuckleball plays and makes his other pitches better.
Yeah, I chatted with him briefly after his first start, which didn't go great. And, I think in that one, he threw the knuckleball like 56%, like he used it a lot, and then immediately scaled back to like, 30 or so percent. And so I kind of assumed that would be where he stayed. And for whatever reason, they felt like that matchup with the Marlins was a good opportunity to use it. And I think there's a little bit of variation. I think he used it a little bit more towards lefties, or a little bit more effectively towards lefties. And then he mentioned just kind of the count. Like, he was part of it was figuring out like where he can get away with using it, and using it in pitchers counts. Especially with a pitch that you can't necessarily control. And I think that's one thing that will be interesting. As more teams get a look at him, you might see the knuckleball, but the point of the knuckleball is like even he doesn't know what it's going to do.
Yeah, you can know it's coming, and good luck.
Still. Yeah, you might have an idea like velocity and that sort of thing, but where and how it moves, I would think that would allow him that kind of unpredictability aspect of it could serve him well, as teams will see him a little bit more.
Yeah, and I guess that's what we'll find out as the season goes on, as he faces the Dodgers for a third and fourth time, as he faces the Diamondbacks, the Giants. Like, does learning that knuckleball give you an advantage? Maybe some, but I think we've seen from knuckleballers in the past, like you said, like you can know it's coming and still have a really hard time with it, versus like it's clear once you've seen a guy's spin, breaking ball, like curveball, slider, like you understand it a little bit better and you're a little more comfortable against it. With a knuckleball, I don't know that you're ever comfortable.
He had one, I forget who it was against, at some point in the Marlins series. I think it was a righty, where it seemed to just go up and in on the guy. It had the normal flutter, and then it's basically like on his hands before it's like, what do you there's no way of knowing that's coming. Like, what do you even do with that? So yeah, it's been fun to watch and been really cool to see. Lastly, and I know you've written about him, what have you enjoyed most so far about the Luis Arraez experience?
I am more impressed with the Luis Arraez than I thought I would be, and I thought he was a pretty good hitter. But like, just kind of, I think, like, we all see what the numbers are, and I saw what the numbers were with Miami before, and I knew that like the Padres needed a lefty who could get on base, and Luis Arraez was like maybe the perfect fit for what this roster needed in terms of just like helping out their offense. So like, I feel like I kind of understood what he would bring just from that perspective, but the dude like never takes an at-bat off. They're losing 9-1 to the Marlins. He is still doing the same things. And it should be easy to say. You should say that everyone does it all the time, but I mean, I'm up in the press box. I'm not paying as close attention when they're down 8-1 in the seventh inning. I'm like,
every at-bat is a situation, AJ.
Yeah, it is. And it's true. And I maybe like I'd be better for my job if I did pay as close attention when they're down 7 runs in the 8th inning. But Luis Arraez takes every at bat as seriously as the last one, as though it's a chance for him to get on base and to start something and to be a spark. And he is energy in the batter's box when he reaches base, in the dugout. That's what's impressed me the most, because I knew what the numbers were. I knew that this guy could hit, but I guess I didn't understand what it takes to be that good a hitter is to really never give an at bat away. And that's how you get to, I don't know, whatever his batting average is now, 330. Yeah. That's really impressive in this day and age.
Has anybody asked David Macias how his left pec is feeling?
I haven't asked him in a little bit, but it can't be easy, and he's going to keep getting a lot more of it. So.
And I think the part, in your piece that jumped out too was like the personality aspect of it as well. Because you figure, like you said, lefty, guy that gets on base, competitive at-bats. He doesn't quite have a Soto shuffle, but he's got like a little bit of a shuffle, which is also
he's got his own.
Kind of fun.
It counts. I would put it like right up there, maybe like the next best shuffle in the game.
But like, there's also, people have talked about kind of the vibes as well. Jerks and Profar also obviously provides that. Tatis, especially when he's going, provides that. But I think that was a part I didn't necessarily know about. Like, he's a really good culture guy to have in the clubhouse, super enthusiastic, a worker. Like, there's that component of it as well, on top of just kind of the natural fit in terms of what he brings to the lineup.
Totally. And we saw it with the Marlins in town this weekend, because like there's a lot of Padre ties with that Marlins team, and they all, to a man, like that's what they say about Arraez first. Not that he can hit, and that's what we all see on the outside, that he can hit, but just kind of how he brings it, how he does it, how he goes about like the preparation for the game, the things he does to get ready to do, and then he goes out there and performs. Like that's, I think there was a serious kind of uptick and a boost, and like the vibes matter too. Like when the Padres get Luis Arraez and he comes in and brings that energy, that matters in terms of where the team was in early May and trying to get them on the right path into like playoff contention. And the fact that they're coming off this offseason where they lost a bunch of guys and kind of figuring out like, is this a playoff caliber roster? Can we get there? Well, you just drop in a guy who's the best average hitter in baseball. And now you put him in that clubhouse and he brings that type of energy that can get like, that is one thing. And then I think the Marlins maybe kind of experienced the opposite end of that with losing a leader and a guy who brought that energy and it's affected them too. And so like that's what's impressed me the most about Luis Arraez, because for years I've looked at his numbers and been like, oh, that's pretty good. That's pretty impressive. Like, look at that batting average. And it's just maybe more than that in terms of what he brings to a team.
Yeah, for sure. Gustavo says this is a banger of an episode, AJ. So well done by you.
Thanks, Gustavo.
What's the rest of the day look like with Carlo?
I think Carlo just got home, so I think probably going to hang out with him. Might go for a run, but then I'll probably just sit on the couch and watch basketball. I don't know what baseball games are on tonight, but I'm just going to sit on the couch and do a whole lot of nothing. So
does he have something that he tends to enjoy? Like if something's on the screen? Because I know like at that age, they're not really kind of dialed into it.
He likes black and white pictures anywhere, and we just
really,
yeah. We have these we have these 9 picture frames that my father-in-law hung up, and they're all just black and white pictures of the Eiffel Tower right now because we're going to put pictures in them. But he loves these pictures of the Eiffel Tower so much that we're like, man,
a good stock image.
Keep the 9 Eiffel Towers up there. So yeah, he's 2 months old as of I don't know what day it is. 2 days ago.
Yeah.
So it's cool. I mean, I play him guitar too. He loves that. He thinks I'm the greatest guitar player in the world because I'm the only one he's ever heard. So I'll probably do some of that today. And other than that, just hang out with him, maybe read him some books and maybe watch some basketball and baseball.
What songs are we playing?
Oh man. I like Fish, Grateful Dead, like those kind of, yeah. I mean, other stuff too.
You have to play Grateful Dead.
He likes Johnny Cash. He likes Johnny Cash. Yeah. I mean, I only know Folsom Prison Blues, but that's about the extent of it.
Well, play a little Dead for Bill Walton tonight.
Yeah. I gotta break out. I should have broke out my tie-dye.
There you go.
Tie-dye for the episode, but maybe next time.
Awesome. Well, just a wealth of info and insight, and always appreciate it. And again, especially squeezing us in when you could be taking a nap or enjoying some quiet time instead. So thank you very much, AJ, and look forward to running into you at Petco, I'm sure, one of these days very soon.
Thanks, Darnay.